Hill, taking a daily look at the biggest stories in Denver sports and interacting live with you, the Coffee Break fam. So sit back, relax, grab a cup of Joe, and enjoy your coffee break. Here's your host, Rachel V. Hill.
What is up, guys? I'm Dante Gomez, filling in for Rachel V. Hill as she is off in Hawaii today. I am joined by the wildly talented Will Peterson. Everybody give it a round of applause for Will.
Hopefully people are clapping to their computer screens or whatever they're watching on their cell phones.
Exactly. Well, I wanted to get into the Denver Broncos finalize their roster, and they've been rounding out their practice squad today. A lot of that breaking news this morning. And I just wanted to get your initial thoughts. We have little Jordan Humphrey coming back. We got Tyler Beatty, Michael Burton, David Sills, among, a couple other of the names, but those are the main, headline names. So what do you make of what the Broncos have done for their practice squad?
Yeah, I mean, obviously keeping 5 wide receivers yesterday kind of blew my mind. I knew another move was coming, but it was a room that we had talked about so much during camp is, hey, this is a strength of the Broncos. And then you looked at it and it was like, okay, so they kept 2 rookies in Franklin and Bailey. Franklin had a bad camp. Bailey had a good camp, but then got hurt. They kept Mims, a second-year player who, let's be honest, he was a Pro Bowl as a returner, but has not flashed as a receiver yet. And then Josh Reynolds, who 2 drops in the NFC title game. Last time we saw him really for a Broncos uniform was the ball going through his hands in Indy. And then, of course, Cortland Sutton, who's a good player, but I don't think of him as a traditional number 1 in the NFL. So, I mean, yeah, little Jordan Humphrey coming back is great, Dante. I assume he'll be active week 1 against the Seahawks, but at the same time, you have Brandon Johnson going to the Pittsburgh Steelers within the last few minutes here too. I have to think Russell Wilson, who just got named the starter, wanted to reunite with Johnson in Pittsburgh. And then Tim Patrick goes to the Lions as well. So it's like, man, this was a room that we all felt pretty good about. And now I'm not feeling as good about it. I assume that Franklin will be inactive against the Seahawks and little Jordan Humphrey will get called up against the practice squad. But isn't the reality here that you want to give Bo Nix the most weapons possible? I'm not so sure the Broncos did that with their final roster cutdowns, and I would have rather seen Johnson than Humphrey on the practice squad, if I'm being honest. Humphrey gets that gold star, he knows Sean Payton from the Saints type deal. So receivers what's really standing out to me right now. I think if you're Bo Nix, you're looking around going, I really developed something with Tim Patrick, and then he's no longer here.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more about the Tim Patrick situation. Does it speak to the Broncos' depth, though, seeing that their wide receivers were picked up by other teams' practice squads this quickly into the, process?
Yeah, I think it does for sure, but would have loved to see that depth on the Broncos. I mean, they kept 9 offensive linemen, right? They kept 6 cornerbacks, like Tremon Smith. I understand Amari Mathis got hurt, but who would have helped the 2024 Denver Broncos more? Tremon Smith or Tim Patrick, even Brandon Johnson? The cat they kept on the offensive line, I don't want to get his name wrong. I think it's Alex something or Frank Crum, maybe.
Frank Crum, yeah.
Frank Crum, but it's like, with all due respect to Frank Crum, is a 9th offensive lineman helping the Broncos win more this year? So, sure, you want to go glass half full. Hey, Tim Patrick is going to go chase a ring in Detroit. Brandon Johnson's going to try to go get on the field in Pittsburgh. Samaje Perine in the last half hour, I know it's a different room, but running back, has joined the Kansas City Chiefs. So, I mean, am I supposed to be happy as a Broncos fan if Tim Patrick and Samaje Perine play each other in the Super Bowl? No, that doesn't make me feel any better. I'm not trying to be a farm system for other NFL teams. I'm happy for the person. I'm happy for the guys that they landed quick jobs. But no, I'm not particularly happy as a Broncos fan.
Gotcha. And that makes sense. So what was your initial reaction as the 53 came out? And was there any standout surprise outside of Tim Patrick?
Well, I mean, 3 undrafted free agents is always unique. The Broncos have a great track record of developing those guys. Chris Harris Jr. was an undrafted free agent. Our own Philip Lindsay was an undrafted free agent. Rod Smith, way back in the day, was an undrafted free agent. So I like it, but if you're keeping 3 of them, I think that is just a sign that, A, the drafting has not been as good as people think over the last 3-4 years, which, again, George Payton's had all those drafts, and he's still the GM of the Broncos. We don't have to go down that rabbit hole, but it's never a good sign when guys who did not get picked through 260 picks, whatever it is, come in and 3 of them make your team. I'm happy for those 3 guys, the Lavelle Baileys of the world, but at the same time, Dante, it's a bit of a red flag about how talented this roster actually was. So that was one major thing that stood out to me for sure.
Gotcha. Definitely. And that's why I brought up the fact that some of these guys did go elsewhere, because it almost feels like, everyone questions the depth and the talent on the roster. So it almost feels like if other teams are, interested in these players, that what we have here might be actually better than what we, are expecting. But I did want to get your thoughts on, so the Broncos didn't get any waiver claims after, final cut day yesterday. Do you expect them to make any moves in the next 24, 40, or, I guess we'll just go before week 1. Do you expect them to make any, moves on that 53?
Well, I mean, obviously they will manipulate with the practice squads. We talked a little bit about Lil Jordan Humphrey. I expect Michael Burton to be up as well, the fullback who got cut yesterday. He's coming back to the practice squad. I know the thought is, oh, Nate Atkins won that job, but I don't think Michael Burton, who's been in this league a long time, is coming back to Denver unless he's got a handshake promise. Hey, dude, you're playing this year. He's got to be in his early 30s. He's too old to want, not in real life terms, you know what I mean, in football terms, to say, hey, I'm just going to go dangle on a practice squad for 17 weeks. So those would be the two to me. But you're right. The Broncos were not awarded any players on waivers today. We don't know if they put in those claims, maybe got outbid. But clearly, Sean, you're right. Sean and George like this roster if they're not going to be super active on the waiver wire. So, no, I actually, we always say it's the initial 53, right? Well, the initial 53 is going to look a lot like the final 53 based on what has developed this morning. So will there be a move or two? Sure. But I think a lot of guys over at Broncos Park, powered by Common Spirit, are taking a deep breath right now because everyone thinks, oh, you made the team, you're good. And I promise you, 4 or 5 guys, their head hit the pillow last night like, I made the team for now, but I'm not so sure I'm going to be on the team 24 hours from now. So they're set to hit the practice field here in about an hour, and we'll hear from Sean Payton at 2:30 today. But I think overall, this is the Broncos team we're going to see in 2024.
Yeah, well, I wanted to add too, Michael Burton, 30-year-old on the practice squad, probably not a bad way to make a living. I'm sure a lot of people around the country would kill to make that practice squad kind of money, especially nowadays.
But he's made NFL money. He's made millions. I mean, think about it. If someone wanted to reduce your pay by 90%, I don't think you'd be real thrilled about it. It's still a good living, don't get me wrong. But I think a 22-year-old college kid looks at that as a good living, not a guy who's been cashing $1 million paychecks the last 8 years, and now they're trying to pay him $4,000 a week or whatever it is.
Yeah, no, that is fair. So between Tim Patrick to the Lions, Brandon Johnson to the Steelers, and correct me if I'm missing any other, but which do you think the Broncos will end up regretting more between letting some of these guys walk out of their building?
Well, I think we have to throw Samaje to the Chiefs in there as well.
Samaje to the Chiefs, yeah.
Yeah, because listen, Patrick Mahomes can make anyone look good. Like, you go through that roster, especially after they traded Tyreek Hill, and you're kind of like, how has this team won the last 2 Super Bowls? First of all, the sneaky defense, and then Mahomes is just a magician. I mean, he'll throw touchdowns. He'll throw touchdowns to people's leftovers. So yes, Travis Kelce's a great player. I don't want to leave him out. But if Pirine goes to KC and sort of takes that third down role that he had with Russell Wilson here, and the Broncos are playing the Chiefs on November 10th, and it's 3rd and 11, and it's a tie game, and Samaje busts off a run for 21 yards, I think inevitably that's the one you regret the most. You only play Pittsburgh in week 2. You don't play Detroit this year. I think the fear is that Samaje Perine, hungry for a ring, does find his way on the field. I'm not saying as a starter. I understand Isaiah Pacheco's the guy in Kansas City, but I think he will be used situationally. Remember, when this tweet came down from Mike Garafolo of the NFL Network, he made it clear that Samaje is going straight to the active roster. That's not what Tim Patrick has to do. He's got to go to the Lions practice squad and then work his way up. The Chiefs are so high on Pirine, they said, no, we'll give you a 53-man spot right away. So of the 3, I think that's the one you're most likely to regret, impacting the Broncos the most, if that makes sense. Because Patrick could go have a big year in Detroit, but unless you play them in the Super Bowl, you're never going to see him this season. And the Broncos aren't playing the Lions in the Super Bowl. Breaking news.
Breaking news. Broncos will not be playing the Lions in the Super Bowl. You heard it here first. Will Peterson reports.
The Lions could be in the Super Bowl. I think we all agree on that. I mean, they were 2 plays away from being in the Super Bowl last year, but hopefully Bo Nix in the next 4 or 5 years has the Broncos in that game, but it's not going to happen as a rookie, never has in NFL history.
Yeah, well, speaking of the Lions going to the Super Bowl last year, we did have a Josh Reynolds made the squad here, but I want to know what your biggest position group-wise, biggest concern, and what room are you most confident in?
Well, I think I'm the most confident in the offensive line because you're bringing back 4 of the 5 starters, right? And I know Russ took 53 sacks last year or whatever it was, But honestly, half those were on Russ. I mean, anyone with their own eyes saw that he was just creating phantom pressure that didn't exist in this pocket that ultimately collapsed on him because he made it collapse on him. So I didn't love losing Lloyd Cushenberry to the Chiefs, or to the Titans. But when you bring back 4 of the 5 offensive linemen of a group that I felt like was a top 10 group a year ago, it's hard not to be the most confident in them. And then I don't want to, beat a dead horse, but it is the wide receiver room that I'm the most concerned about. You're going to have someone emerge kind of out of nowhere. Like if Mims or Vele can kind of come out of nowhere, that's going to be a big boost for them. But man, Sutton is a 1, Reynolds at a 2, and then it's kind of like, who? And that, I mean, that's kind of where Greg Dulcich comes into this plan, right? Like he hasn't been able to stay on the field, but he's so tantalizingly good in those rare moments we do see him on the field. So you would need a Dulcich to step up to sort of offset the underwhelming wide receiver room. But yeah, as of this moment, the wide receiver room is the one I'm most concerned about.
Okay, yeah, I went a little different direction here. My biggest room concerned the safeties, actually. I don't love where they're at. I was looking at the 53. Brandon Jones is still, not had a lot of playing time out there through training camp because of his injury, and just not a lot of names that, are super reliable, especially for, Broncos country, who's used to having, one of the most reliable safeties in the league. So don't love their depth and where they're at there. And then I went a different direction as well on what I, most confident in. I actually like their quarterback room. As far as the depth, I like all 3 guys they kept. I think Bo Nix could be, upper half quarterback in this league. And I was looking around some of the other rooms, and there's some bad backup quarterbacks around this league. I also want to get your thoughts real quick on, did you see the Browns kept 4 quarterbacks? If you thought 3 here was a lot,
yeah,
I want your thoughts on, them keeping all 4 over there.
Well, yeah, I mean, first of all, let me hit on your 2 points. Safety is a good one because Brandon Jones hasn't played in the preseason. Dante, this injury was a month ago, and Sean Payton told us it was a 2-week injury. And now it's been a month, and we still haven't seen him. So, hey, go out there week 1, September 8th. Here comes DK Metcalf 60 yards down the sideline. Go make a play on him in Seattle. That is worrisome. This dude was brought in to replace Justin Simmons. He could, but to not get any reps in training camp really at all and nothing in the preseason, that's a good room to point out. Safety for sure. And the whole Caden Stearns thing. Like, why did you just randomly let Caden Stearns go 2.5 weeks ago when safety was a depth? Quarterback, okay, I see what you're saying, that like, hey, they do have 3 guys that could play, but Nix is really going to have to turn into a guy for that to be a strong room. I think we know Stidham's ceiling, and then obviously with Zach Wilson, I mean, he's loads of potential, but he's still just potential for now. That's why he's still on this team, a little football rehab, if you will. The Browns keeping 4 quarterbacks is just a very Cleveland-y thing. It seems like, they're going to try to trade. Is it Thompson Robinson? Is that the cat I'm thinking of up there?
Yeah, he was in there. The 2 names I've heard more likely are Huntley and Jameis. And it sounds like they like DTR out of UCLA a couple years ago for maybe more of a long term.
There's a report that, hey, they're not trading Jameis either. So it's like, well, who are you going to trade then? If you're not trading DTR, you're not trading with Jameis, maybe Huntley, I guess. But Cleveland going to Cleveland. So yeah, I guess we shouldn't be too worried about the Broncos keeping 3 here if there's another NFL team that's keeping 4.
Exactly. That was my thing. That would, I know you've been a big advocate of why do we need 3? We got the 2 we need. So just wanted to get your thoughts on that. And then you did mention Zach Wilson there for a sec. What did you make of George Payton's comments on Wilson over the over his press conference yesterday?
Yeah, I mean, just to recap those, he called him a starter like 7 times in 26 seconds. It was like this gushing. It was not a GM speak type answer. It was this gushing praise of Zach Wilson. And the cynic in me is that's George giving himself a pat on the back for pulling that big trade off that took a month to go down, even though it was like a 6 for a 7th and Zach. It was not complicated, but they want us to think they were landing on the moon by pulling that deal off. But I think what it indicates is that Zach Wilson was never going to get cut. You listen to how Sean Payton talked about him to his former quarterback, Chase Daniel, and then how the GM talked about him. I know some national folks are like, ooh, is Zach Wilson going to make the team? There was never a debate. Zach Wilson was making this football team. But could it be posturing to trade him down the road? Sure. Do I think they're trading him now? No. I want to put that conversation to bed. I don't think they're trading him now, but I do think that, he's a free agent after this year, right? So could he be kind of Sam Darnold-y? And there's a big market for Zach Wilson as a free agent next summer? Probably. So if you're the Broncos, why not lock him down to a 2-3 year extension for $5 million a year, the same money you gave Stidham? If you're truly interested in rehabbing this guy, then don't just make it a 1 year project where he's not going to see the field. Make it a 2-3 year project. Zach seems to like Denver. Maybe he'd put pen to paper on something like that.
Yeah, I like that line of thinking. I think he could be a great answer at the back, or the long-term answer at backup quarterback here. It seems like he's really, taking a liking to Denver and, Coach Sean Payton and what, Sean Payton can bring for him as well. One more Broncos topic before we move on to some other Colorado topics here. But Russell Wilson named the starter in Pittsburgh just a couple minutes ago. How much are you looking forward to seeing him back in Denver week 2?
Well, I'm glad he's the starter because I think Broncos fans want to boo Russell Wilson in week 2. And if he wasn't the starter, he wasn't going to play here in week 2. And it's kind of hard to boo a guy who is holding a clipboard. So, listen, I'm not as anti-Russ as some folks are, but I'm not pro-Russ either. I mean, the guy came here in one of the biggest trades in NFL history and was a total flop, total dud. And the Broncos are paying him $83 million over the next 2 years to play for someone else, or they're taking that cap hit and paying him 38, 39 to play for the Steelers this year. So, I mean, Russ really screwed up this franchise. Maybe if Bo Nix works out, the wound won't be as deep, but to just pretend like Russ isn't a villain in Denver is silly. He is a villain in Denver. So I hope fans count down the play clock on him like they did for Hackett. Like, I'm not saying be malicious. I'm not saying anything like that, but there's good fans, and the Broncos fans are good fans, and anything you can do to give your team an advantage and make Russ's life tougher in week 2, that's a smart decision. So, like I said, I'm glad he's the starter because unless he gets hurt and no one's rooting for him to get hurt, Mike Tomlin's not pulling the plug after one game. He'll be the starter here week 2 in Denver.
Yeah, very much looking forward to that. I think that's a pretty winnable game for these Broncos, so should be a good one here at their home opener. Let's move on to some Colorado football here. They kick off in a little less than 30 hours. What are your initial thoughts? What's your predictions? And for the tail end of your answer here, do you think we get a contentious post-game presser from Dion?
Well, I mean, listen, North Dakota State's won something like 9 of the last 13 FCS championships. So anyone who just assumes the Buffs are going to roll, not really doing your homework. This isn't your typical FCS school. North Dakota State, I mean, that's Carson Wentz. That's Trey Lance, right? So I know they've been a little down. I think they lost 4 games last year, but I hope the Buffs don't sleepwalk through it because the Bison could give them a bit of a play if they do. I still think CU wins probably by 10 points to 2 touchdowns, somewhere in that range. Give me like, I don't know, 35-24, something like that. So that'll be good. But I don't think it'll be contentious post-game because the reason it was contentious after week 1 last year was because they were such massive underdogs to TCU, and Dion wanted to rub it in everyone's face. If he only wins by 11 points, I don't think he's going to be asking anyone, do you believe? But that said, it's Coach Prime, so you never know, Dante. You never know. I mean, it's worth tuning into. College football games take 4 hours, so 10:15 on Thursday night. You better believe I'll be checking out Coach Prime's presser.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, press conferences at this point have become appointment television. You got to tune into those.
They have.
And then last thing I wanted to get to here, I know how much you love hating on the Rockies. They actually set a record last night. So not the good kind of record, though. They have 4 losses this year when leading by 4+ in the 9th or later. So I just wanted to give you a little open space here to do a little some Rockies hate, I guess.
Well, I mean, I dislike the fact that the owner will never get outside help. And like last night's another perfect example of this is just acceptable. I mean, you and I are spending 2 minutes on this because they made history. I mean, 4 losses in the 4th inning, but this isn't on anyone's radar. Like, that's the thing is the owner has made the Rockies irrelevant by, I mean, it's August 28th. Dude, they were irrelevant by June 28th. Like, that's what's frustrating to me is like, if this happened in a baseball town that, like, if this happened in St. Louis or New York or Boston, it would be leading every talk show in that market, right? But for the Rockies, it's just like, it was a Tuesday night at 9:30 and they did something stupid that we've seen many a times this year. That's what makes me the most sad, my friend, is that they just aren't on the radar, that stuff like this is borderline acceptable because no one's paying attention. I mean, it was bark at the park night. People were more concerned about the cute dogs in the stands than they were about the abysmal meltdown on the field. Apathy is a terrible thing, and that's what makes me the most sad about the Rockies right now.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's a great quote I love that's it's the opposite of love is in hate, it's apathy. So
yeah.
And so definitely that's how it seems like Colorado baseball fans are, at least for their Rockies. Well, I want to thank Will for joining me here. We'll be back tomorrow. Me and Jake Shapiro will be doing a full Colorado, North Dakota State football breakdown tomorrow. Thank you for joining again, and you guys have a good rest of your guys' day. Thank you.